Hi, my name is Laurent Goldstein. I want to welcome you to the BizWell Studio interview series. And today I'm very happy to have Stefan Zavalin with us. I met Stefan during a TED Talk that I saw online. I was very impressed with his philosophy and his presentation on the importance of movement, especially in the workplace. I've always been a big believer that we need to keep moving, especially as we age. And this is a topic that can keep coming back in our film, Your Second 50, which is a film on the topic of aging and how to age better. And to keep moving is definitely important. I also believe that if you want to have a very effective workforce in your business, it's important that they also have good habits when it comes to sitting at their computer, or hopefully implementing more standing at their computer at their workstation. Stefan is a doctor in physiotherapy and a kinesiologist. He's also an author of a new book called Sit Less, and he is also running a podcast. But first and foremost, Stefan is an avid mover. And I want to talk about that today, but I also want to talk about overcoming challenges. And we have a lot to learn from somebody like Stefan, and I'm really happy that you are here with us today, Stefan. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
I'm excited to be here, and what an intro. I wish I had even written that, because that was amazing. It's been a lot. It's been a journey. And I love that you said that I love moving, because when I go back and think about it, it's been strewn throughout the entirety of my life.
Yes, and recently, could you share with us a little bit about your move? I think you are from Nashville, but you moved to California. How did that go?
So originally, way back when, I was born in Russia. And when I was 7, the whole family moved to Nashville, Tennessee, of all places. Don't ask me. It was between Paris, France, and Nashville, Tennessee.
Well, I like the music in Nashville. There's nothing wrong with that.
It's fair. And then more recently, my wife and I decided that the move, we needed to move more so for the energy and the vibe and the changes. And that if we stayed longer, we would just end up living forever in Nashville. And so it was finally, you just have to jump into it and do it. And obviously, we're loving it. And I think that's the story we hear most of the time, is what you're afraid of a lot of times, just taking the plunge and going across it. The drive was maybe not as smooth as we would have wanted it to be. And we took it very easily. But at the same time, we made an adventure of it. We were exhausted by the time we got to Los Angeles, but it's wonderful. And it's been better than I imagined it to be, because we found how truly that change and moving and changing and having a new environment, that impacts us so greatly.
Stefan, could you share with us how it came about to do a TED Talk? That was an important milestone in your career. That's why we met. Could you share with us what motivated you to do it and what was the outcome?
Sure. When I was in the clinic, I always thought, for years, I thought, I'm going to give a TED Talk. I feel like I have things to say. I feel like I like saying things. Maybe when I am wise enough and much, much older, I will finally give a TED Talk. And then I started my own business, which is a longer story. But as I was getting into it, I came across a coach that was helping people get their TEDx talks. And I thought, hold on, this actually might be very possible. This might be incredibly doable. And it was one of those things, instead of saying, oh, no, not me, how could I couldn't possibly. I said, let's give it a try. Let's go into this and give it a try. And the great thing about this specific coach was that he did little preliminary interviews to see if you had a TED Talk in you or not. And after he talked to me, he said, why haven't you done one already? What has taken you so long? And I'm over here thinking, what? I couldn't do this. And so once I had the coach, it was a lot of work. And I realized that it was more work than I thought, because I thought you get up there, you talk for 15 minutes, but there's so much preparation that goes into it that by the time you get to it, you think, oh, this is going to be, the actual talk is a piece of cake. It's all the preparation for 8 months beforehand that you have to do. And in my case, there's an interesting side to it where I'm blind and I lost my vision fully about 5 years ago. And I say fully, everything is very blurry. Everybody's a beautiful blur, as I like to say it. It's not as if it's completely black, but that means I can't read off of a piece of paper or anything like that. That seems like a huge obstacle to most people. On the flip side of it, I have to get really good at memorizing things. It's just the way that I am. Luckily, I have a great short-term memory, so that helped already. And what I found, I didn't realize this until I finally got to a week before the talk itself. We recorded in Vancouver, and all of the other speakers, they had their papers. And anytime they forgot something, they would glance down at their papers, and they would glance down at their papers, and they used it as this crutch. Meanwhile, I couldn't look down at a paper to do it. And all of a sudden I thought, well, this is actually a blessing, because for the last month and a half, I've been practicing rehearsing my talk without any paper, and I knew every single word on that script. And I didn't mess up. I didn't have to pause for it. I could practice so many other things. And my talk, this is not my words, this is the coach's words, was at the top compared to all the other speakers that were there just by that delivery. Now, we're not talking about subject or anything like that. We're more talking about that ability to speak and go through it. And that was because I didn't have to rely on a piece of paper.
It was a fantastic talk. And I mean, I think it is, yes, I think the fact that you could not rely on a piece of paper meant you had to show up more authentically. And also you had to rehearse a bit more. But you had to have more spontaneity in how you deliver your talk. I think that would be actually a very good topic to discuss for another interview we would do together, because so many business owners and entrepreneurs could actually benefit to tell their story in that kind of format, like TED Talk, for example. So we could learn from your experience. And that would be, I think, a good thing, especially because you had to deal with such an obstacle, which is having lost your vision, which is already obviously such a huge obstacle, but on top of it, having the stress and the pressure of having a great delivery at a TED Talk was probably very challenging. And this is one of the things we like to talk about at BizWell. So many business owners face challenges every day. A lot of it has to do with how do we deal with them, like our mindset. So I'd love to hear from you a little bit more about your journey with the obstacle you have of having lost your vision about 4 or 5 years ago, and how you have been able to handle it, like, you know, in a way that you're still able to run a business better than ever. You even have a podcast now, you wrote a book, so things are really moving despite the challenges. So can you share a little bit of that with us, please?
Absolutely. I think a lot of it has to do with the way I was losing my vision, that process, and the mindset that got integrated throughout all of it. It was obviously, it started with denial of thinking, no, this is not going to be an issue. It's going to be okay. It's going to get fixed. And then as more and more I realized, oh, this is going to greatly affect my life, there were still parts where I would go, okay, but I can still do these other things. I've been connecting it sometimes to, for diet, for some people with diet. I am now vegan. I've been vegan for many years. And people go, what you can't eat. Oh my goodness, you can't eat. Or in this case of vision, you can't do this, you can't do that. I go, but think about all the things you can still do. Because truthfully, you don't know the vast majority of things on Earth in the universe. So when you think of the tiny amount of things you can do, you're not even aware of the vast majority of the things you can still do. And as you just start exploring that was the big thing as I kept going. And something that my dad said to me in the middle of me losing my vision was, I initially started undergrad as a music major. I was going to play in orchestras. Music was going to be my life. He was a theoretical physicist. My mom was an engineer. So it was this moment of there going, uh-oh, black sheep of the family, he's going into the arts. How is he going to make a living for himself? And that's why I kind of made the switch of, okay, I need to get something with continued education. And I went more into the movement side, even though movement was always present. And during me losing all my vision, my dad at one point said, well, you can always still do music. And it was that tiny amount of going, oh, I can? I never considered that to be an opportunity. Whether or not he meant it doesn't even matter. It was this point of thinking, hold on, I can. So then I held on to this belief of I could do whatever. And honestly, I wrote a lot of parody songs, and humor was a huge way that I got through the process of losing my vision, because I just ended up making a lot of jokes about being blind, and I still do to this point. And I think for some people, that might not be their coping mechanism, but it's finding that way that you can find, what can I still do, and overcoming those limitations. Because even now, sure, somebody goes, I have a book out. Would you like to read my book? Inherently, I would say, are you kidding me? Of course, I'm blind. What do you mean read your book? But now we have Kindle. My phone can read a book out to me perfectly. They don't even have to have an audiobook version. Easily solved. You mentioned the writing the book. Somebody would say, well, he can't see. How is he going to write a book? People go speech to text. This is one where it gets kind of interesting. I actually had to say, you know what? I'm going to just push through and have some discipline about this. Because speech to text, you still have to go back and edit, and it actually doesn't work out. I had to I said, every day you're going to sit down and write 1,000 words. It doesn't have to be good. It doesn't matter. Just sit down and write it. I am blessed to have a wife that is an editor, so she got to go back through it afterwards and edit some of the stuff. But it came down to, what can you do, and then go with it. For me, being blind, writing a blog, I'm not the best at it, so I do video things. There are so many things that you can still do for your business, and you can change about it that you find, okay, what do I excel at? If somebody else is doing it better than you, the question doesn't always have to be, how can I be better than them? Maybe you have to do something different. But then it's always going to be different because you are different in the way that you do it. So that's been the biggest thing, is what can you still do, as opposed to focusing on, I can't.
That is, I love that philosophy. And I do relate to the vegan part, because I'm vegan as well. I've been vegan for 5 or 6 years, I think, about now. And yes, being vegan, there is so many options, so many things. I look at it as a discovery, like discovering new food, discovering new ways to cook, and it's fun. You have to make it fun. You have to enjoy the process. I think that's one of the keys. Now, what you're talking about is, what can I do? Oh, maybe I can still play music like your dad told you, or study music, or be in the music space. That is fascinating. It goes way beyond the concept of looking at the glass being half full instead of half empty. It goes much further than that, because it implies you actually take action, Stefan. And I think you are the kind of person who is not, letting up, things, obstacles, letting you down. You actually take action and look at ways to overcome, circumvent, and have fun in the process. And the fact that you started a podcast is another good example of that.
Absolutely. I've been, especially through this journey of starting the business, if there's anything in life that I've found this to be true, and it is absolutely in business and being an entrepreneur, it's that don't overthink it, just do it. You're going to have to course correct no matter how much planning you have into it. You're going to have to course correct. So you might as well start now and then course correct. And yes, there are a lot of people out there that will also say, well, you have to think about and plan out the thing. Yes, there's planning, there's also overthinking. And the vast majority of people overthink, overplan, and then they start doing it and they realize, I didn't even think this was going to be an issue and think this was going to be a problem. I'll give you you brought up the podcast, the perfect example of it. I started the podcast. I had all these ideas of, how do I get guests? Do I make it video? What do I do? How do I put it on social media? How often does it come out? And the thing that got to me, what was the sound file that I needed to use that wouldn't go up on Spotify? I didn't even think that was going to be an issue. And until I published a couple episodes, I didn't realize that was going to be a problem. And that's it right there. Is just try, start, and then continue adjusting. I'm lucky that I'm stubborn. I think that's the other part, is that my mom has always told me, she loves telling the story of the jump rope. I got a jump rope at one point for Christmas, and I didn't know how to jump rope. And I think I was in middle school at this point, and I said, I'm going to learn how to jump rope. And I opened it up the morning before we were going to school. And so I kept jumping and missing and hitting. And the entire family was pleading for me to stop jumping because I wasn't getting it. They were like, you'll do it later. You'll do it after you get from school, something. And I was like, no, I'm going to get it. And I think I maybe got like 10 jumps in a row. And I said, now I can jump rope. I did it. I learned it there. And everybody sighed with relief because finally all the shouting and yelling at the jump rope ended. But that was kind of ingrained of like, no, we're going to do this. Discipline, discipline, discipline.
Yeah, and you know what you're talking about, like doing and starting things, implementing things as an entrepreneur, not waiting for everything to be perfect, or the I's to be dotted and the T's being crossed, but instead of that, just jumping into it. I am kind of the same way as well. And it's interesting because it seems to me that your concept of sitting less and introducing more movement in your life as far as the workplace extends much further than that with you. It seems to me that you also have adopted a flexibility of thinking. So you're moving through life, not just physically, but you also have a psychology and a physiology that is geared towards movement.
For many years, before I even got into this business or even thought of making my own business or anything, I always said that my biggest fear in life is stagnation, which I think I learned the word when I was young, and I thought, ooh, I like that word, so I'm just gonna, that's it, that's good. But my biggest fear in life is stagnation. So at any point, staying still. This doesn't mean that I was just running around and maybe being hyper all the time, but in any way, I always wanted to learn the next thing, do that next part. And if it was too repetitive, after a while, I went, okay, I'm not interested. Sure, there are certain things that you have to keep doing to get better at, but that's not really repetitive. If you're learning something from it, it's not repetitive. You're gaining something new. If you are doing the same thing, you're not gaining anything new from it, and you're not growing from it, why are you still doing it in any shape in life? So absolutely, I have that philosophy, and it's interestingly shifted lately also. You mentioned sitting less. And I try to tell people it's sit less versus move more. And that's a lot what the TED Talk's about. And I apply it to life as well, because we tend to think I need to do more and more of the good. I need to eat more vegetables. I need to be more productive. I need to exercise more. At the same time, we maintain all the other habits and all the other stuff that we're doing that is bad and that is weighing us down. And so I say, okay, how can I do less of it? How can I eat less junk food, be less ineffective, and sit less? And then naturally, the better things come in. They may not be good, but they will be better than those. And that is infinitely scalable, because the doing more and more and more, you can't scale it. After a while, you're going to burn out. And we're seeing so many people talking about burnout, overwhelm. With this other philosophy, you really can't, because slowly but surely, you just get everything done with it. But if we don't address it, we get overwhelmed.
Well, I think, Stefan, what you're saying is, is very profound. And I've noticed that sometimes it is the apparently most simple tips that can have the most profound impact. And one of the reasons probably why people do not succeed with New Year's resolution, like the majority of people who make a New Year's resolution, they don't follow through after a few weeks or a few months, is because they do it in the sense, I'm going to start doing more of that, or I'm going to implement that. What you're saying is the New Year's resolution could be to do less of something that could be considered a bad habit or a habit that doesn't really serve you well. So to me, that is profound. It looks simple, but it's, the thing is, it's about getting people to implement solutions. So we need to remove barriers for them to implement better solutions in their businesses and in their lives.
Something to that effect as well is you can automatically tell how successful a change is going to be by the wording of the goal. So in this case, and the reason I bring it up is, if you go, this is my New Year's resolution, I'm going to start January 1st, or the other common throughout the year where we go, yep, it starts on Monday. You've already decreased the chances that it's actually going to work. If it's something that you're going to do for the rest of your life, why does it have to start tomorrow? Why can't it start right now? Now, maybe if it's a morning routine or something else where you're saying, I'm not going to pick up my phone in the mornings. Okay, I understand it has to start tomorrow. It's not morning yet. But why does it have to start Monday? If you're doing that, you're saying, okay, I'm going to add more of this thing that I'm going to be doing immediately by doing that. How can you start it now? And this is the other part, is I think with all my experience of having people change their habits, people start too big. People think it's going to be this huge shift and it's going to change my life completely. And so I'm going to start. So in the case of, for example, sitting less, people go, I'm going to stand 2 hours more at work. Hold on. You've been standing for maybe 5 minutes or 10 minutes at most. If you do that, you're not going to be successful. Start really, really small. Start so small that you go, oh yeah, I'm just going to start that today. That's all I have to do. Let me start it today. Perfect. Grow from there. Because if you're thinking I'm going to start next year or next week or next month, you'll do it for a week or two, and then it's just going to go out the window.
Stefan, is there a way to kind of measure the productivity at the workplace from the team, the staff, or the team members, if they incorporate standing more, moving more instead of sitting? And by the way, I like what you said about not confounding moving more or moving a lot with being hyperactive. That's not the case. I think it's also being more aware of our space, or basically how we move in space, and incorporating more awareness, I think, in how we are actually moving through space. Being more aware of our spine and how it moves and taking care of it. I mean, all these things, don't you think?
Absolutely. I think the other misconception people get a lot of times is they go, oh, so I just stand. Standing is better than sitting, but movement is always going to be what we strive for. And so even if you just stand very still in front of your computer, you're going to have other issues there, and especially low back and spine and all, because now you don't have a chair supporting you. You have to do it all yourself. And you've been sitting for decades and decades. Your body goes, I don't know how to do this. What am I doing? And then you get the imbalances. All of a sudden you get backaches. My low back is tight, whatever else it might be. So yes, that awareness is huge. And awareness is where it really just should start. Because if you start implementing without awareness, you have no idea what you're actually doing. But in terms of productivity, most all businesses have some measurement of productivity. Maybe it's how many sales the person gets. Maybe it's how quickly the actual project gets done, how many spreadsheets, whatever it is. There's usually some source of productivity measurement. The question is, how does it change as you start implementing these things? And initially, there's not a huge impact. So I'll give you an example for standing, if that's the one that we're going to use. They did at a call center, they just gave them standing desks, sit-stand desks that they could change. In the first month, there was a small impact on productivity, but it wasn't very big. By month 6, it was about a 45% increase in productivity.
That is huge.
It's huge, and they weren't necessarily trained. They just gave them the desks and they said, hey, go ahead and please use this. The point is that a lot of times I think we're gonna go, well, I've tried it for 2 weeks, there was no change. Okay, or was there a very tiny change, and really we're looking at a long-term solution that is gonna happen? Because like I said, you should start very small, because if you start standing and you're not aware, you're gonna just hurt. If you're hurting, you're not gonna be as productive. And all of a sudden you're thinking, well, this isn't really gonna work. So in terms of productivity, that's really the trajectory that it goes by.
Again, it boils down to, I think, inspiring the team, showing the example that you do that too, and inspiring the team that it's going to be fun, that it's going to be giving them a new source of energy. It's going to give them maybe more stimulus, more variety in their daily routine at work, different attitude. I mean, when we stand, we actually project better than when we sit. As when we speak, for example, I like to interview people standing usually and not sitting, because I find that they are able to project more energy rather than doing it in a sitting position. And also there is the awareness of our position in space and time. And, you know, one of my very close friends, and he was the topic of our second documentary called To Life, Death and Beyond, the Music of Magma. His name is Christian Vander. He's one of the most celebrated and famous drummers who ever existed. And he's rated one of the top 100 drummers who ever lived in Rolling Stone magazine. And Christian is talking about the fact that as a drummer, obviously, you have to be having great awareness of, you know, all your spine, your shoulders, your arms, and all of that, keeping it coordinated and all of that. But with him, he extends that to how he moves during the day. So basically, when he's walking, when he's sitting down, he has a level of awareness of how his body is moving through space. And for him, it's music. So he's moving through space, even going on, on his daily routine, almost thinking about it from a musical standpoint, So that's very interesting. But there are new things that people will discover, I think, new sources of energy, better results in productivity as they start incorporating sitting less at work, because that's kind of what we're talking about now, and standing and moving more. And I think I'd like you to tell me a little bit more about the book and the way the book is structured and how you basically what is the main focus of the book.
So the book is a 3-in-1 almost. So each chapter is divided into 3 sections. There's a story part, which you get to follow along with a character. Her name's Alice, as you go through, and she goes through a lot of struggles. My favorite part about writing Alice is that Alice fails repeatedly. She keeps on trying things, they kind of work, and then she backslides. I hate when in books a character does one thing and their life completely changes and is perfect,
because
and there you go.
Reality.
It's not real life. Yeah, exactly, not the reality. So after each story section, there is more of the kind of scientific, hey, let's get down to the actual part of it section of this is what you need to know, with the scientifically based research stuff and all of that. I still put in some fun humor jokes in there as well, because that's just me. And then the final piece of every chapter is the next 3 steps for you. And those are usually things you could do right now. Because in the really procedural stuff, you can go, okay, I can see how I can get to this in 6 months. But the 3 next steps is immediately. As soon as you finish the chapter, you could do it right there and then. And some of it has to do with mindset. It's not all just stand up and move. Some of it has to do with things like, what is the language that's being used in your work office? Are you saying, let's start this meeting, everybody sit down. Why are you guys standing around? Get back to work. Okay, what's the language around movement that you're using? Because then you're already saying, hey, our culture here in this area is we sit work. We don't actually like movement. That might be problematic. So it's good for leaders in that sense. But one of the pieces, and it's the final chapter, it's my favorite thing to say to leaders and anybody in a group is, all of us can be a leader. So even if you may not be the top level manager and you're just the employee, you can lead by example. So the book that way applies to pretty much everybody up and down the chain of command, because you can't start from the bottom and go up. You can't start from the top and go down. It has to be everybody changing and adapting at the same time and not pointing fingers. One of the things that I like to say is you can't meet somebody in the middle if you're not walking towards the middle. It's not going to happen. And so that way the book is meant as a manual for you, an inspirational story if you want to use it that way, and then also a workbook with the 3 next steps to use for yourself.
Is it a book that maybe business owners can recommend for their employees to read and implement, so that they can implement better habits in the workplace?
It's a book for the business owners themselves, because the vast majority of them sit at desks, so then they can understand it from that perspective. And then, yes, that way anybody can get, who sits at a desk, can get a little piece from it that's different, because it's going to, and then as you progress, if you have somebody who you just hired as a manager, there's a big part of the book that talks about how do you lead other people to start making those changes. That would be perfect for those middle managers, especially if you're having a lot of them in your organization and you're going, I don't know how to make them better leaders. Movement is one of the easiest ways, because we all have to move.
I really also appreciate what you're saying about the power of words and the way our mindsets, our belief systems are conditioned by what we've been hearing. Get back to work. Sit down, get back to work, as is a good example of that. So people associate working with sitting, and changing that culture is a very important step. I remember a long time ago, I was working for a company that was based in France and had an office in Montreal. And the Canadian branch of that company was run by an Australian who, when he took over the Canadian side of the company, the first meeting he had, he got everybody, like all the staff, everybody, all the employees, the salespeople, everybody from the team. And he told them that he has a philosophy in business, and he never wants to hear the word problem. It doesn't exist in his business mind or sphere. And so he would punish people who would use that word. And he would want people to change the using problem for challenges or opportunities instead of saying problem. Well, that had a big impact. And I still today, I remember that, even though this was 30 years ago, I still remember that piece of advice or philosophy and try to implement it. So yes, the power of words, it is so important. And I'm really glad that you mentioned it.
I'll give you another one that's interesting, where it's the backwards, where you don't notice that you're doing it because you're thinking you're saying something positive. And it's easily to see this with if you're standing up for Zoom calls, which I stand up for all my Zoom calls, so I sometimes hear this. And then if you're eating something healthy around your friends, if somebody goes, "Oh my goodness, you're eating a salad, that's so healthy, I could never do that." You just basically told yourself you can't be healthy. And then you're wondering why diets don't seem to work for you or exercise doesn't seem to work for you. If you don't believe that you can, and that's the language you use in the office, and you go, "Wow, you're standing up today. I couldn't do, I just have all this." And great, you just put up all of your excuses right there.
Limiting beliefs
Exactly.
is an excuse for people not to change. I mean, change is uncomfortable. It requires work, but it also brings in new sources of energy, I have two questions for you, Stefan. First of all, you've done several podcast episodes already. I'd like to ask you, out of all the episodes you have done, is there something that really stuck with you? Like something you heard, a piece of advice, or something one of your guests told you? Can you share an example with us?
It's not what the guest told me. And actually, she told me the story after we finished recording, interestingly enough. But it's been this, the moral of the story that I'll tell you is that never judge a person initially. If you don't know, you don't know. And so here's what happened. We get on, she's talking about dancing and her taking psychedelics and the underground dance scene and how dangerous it can be at some point. Very interesting stuff. And we're doing this over Zoom, and all of a sudden, her picture goes to tiny and it starts breaking up a little bit with audio. And I'm thinking, oh my goodness, come on, like, we're recording here. Couldn't you have done something? Thinking this in my head, but I'm going, okay, we're going to struggle through this. We finish the interview and we start talking, and she's going, I'm just so grateful the internet held up and the internet was so good. In my head, I'm thinking, good? What do you mean good? That was terrible. Why are we doing? But I'm not saying it. And she goes, the actual antenna that does the Wi-Fi on the mountain where I live, the solar panel melted. And so I actually didn't have Wi-Fi. And so I got on a bus for an hour and a half to go into town and rent a hotel room to be on your show.
Wow.
And I'm sitting there going, okay, so I'm the ass. Got it. I should never. And to me, I thought, my goodness, you cared so much about this that instead of just saying, hey, let's reschedule, you took the time to go all the way into town and get a hotel room for me.
That's wonderful.
And it was so impactful for me. That was probably the biggest thing that I just went, I am grateful for every single guest that I have on that show, no matter.
That's a beautiful story, Stefan. Thank you. Second question I had for you. At BizWell Studio, we like to talk about what we call the butterfly impact. I have a belief that sometimes, actually very often, it is the apparently very small events in our life that actually have a profound impact on what direction we take in our life, what we become, the business we start, or whatever it is. So a small event in time and space can have a profound effect and impact on the rest of our lives. And of course, when it happens, we do not know. So I call it the butterfly impact. And I was wondering if you recall something like that, and that would have taken you in that direction to become a doctor in physical therapy and become a kinesiologist and do all the things you've done around movement. What is it that made you interested in movement in the first place?
So it's interesting. And if I had to put down the exact decision, it's actually not where you would think it would be. The tiny little butterfly effect happened when I was very much into filmmaking when I was in middle and high school. And I was also into music. None of things that have to do with movement very much. And I had to make the decision. There was a point where my dad said, okay, I want to invest in your future in the sense I can either buy you a very expensive instrument or I can buy you a very expensive video camera for your future. You have to pick. Is it going to be video or music? And I ended up picking music. And it was music that got me to go to the undergrad university where really everything ended up changing in the sense of I got way more into movement. I started a CrossFit club. I joined a gymnastics team. And the whole reason for joining the gymnastics team, they had a pledge for not drinking. And I haven't been drinking to this day as a result. All these things happened that eventually I realized how much I truly loved movement and was into all of the amounts of exercise, but also encouraging people for it. That I wasn't in it because I liked doing it. I was in it because I loved seeing other people enjoying it. And so then physical therapy is the obvious choice of I want people to enjoy movement and be happy and pain-free when they're moving. And then further and further, the interesting part that then the video and the music catch right back up to me when I'm in the clinic and I realize I love making short videos. I love writing music and parody songs about movement. And all of that just folded in together to me influencing people and helping people discover their love for movement. And thus the name of the company, which is Love to Move. So
yeah, that's a great story. And actually, if you look at music and movement, first of all, it starts with the same letter M. And people move on music. They move to music, I mean, definitely when I listen to some music piece, depending on which one, of course, but you feel like you're moving. And I was talking about my friend, the drummer, who is also, aware of, he's moving through space, even as he walks, but he's moving in music in a way. So it's incorporating that music into your movement is really beautiful. So I like that story. And yes, if you had decided to invest in the camera equipment, maybe you would not be doing what you're doing today. But at the time you didn't know it. So I think it's great to always be more aware and open to decisions we make and events that happen to us, and see where they take us, but also having some awareness and being open-minded. And the last question I had for you, it's a trick question, is what's your, as a vegan, what is your favorite vegan dish?
that is a trick question. So because my initial jump would inevitably have been something like pizza or anything, but lately it's been avocado toast, and it's simple. Currently it's avocado bagels, but it's avocado, salt, olive oil. That's it. There's nothing super fancy that you need to add. It's very easy, and it's there. And honestly, we eat it almost every single day because it's.
Well, I love avocados, and I love avocado toast too. And sometimes it is the most simple things, the most simple dish like this case that can give you great pleasure as well, and be good for your health at the same time. Stefan, it was a real pleasure having you with us today. I know you will come back. There's so much we can cover together. It was very enjoyable talk. So thank you very much. All the best to you, and I hope you enjoy your time in this beautiful weather in California right now.
Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure.